Hi, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic start to the week after a wonderful holiday. I'm Anna Hagen. This is an episode of Nxt In Sales. I am so excited to introduce you guys to the guest that I have today. I am talking with Chris Smith, who is the Chief Revenue Officer over at Aqua Sec. Chris, thanks so much for joining us today. How's it going?
It's great. Anna, thank you for the enthusiasm and thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, obviously you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit. I'd love if you could give a little bit of background into yourself and your career just so that viewers can get to know you before we dive in.
Sure. So first of all, I live in Boston, well, outside of Boston, but I'm from Pennsylvania originally. So, so I moved up here for high tech, and my sister's the one that got me into this racket. And I moved up here about 27 years ago. Overall, I've been in this game for 30 years. Some of the fortune I've had is 7 company events, 2 by way of IPO, and then 5 by way of M&A.
Wow.
And I'm expecting 3 more before I actually develop a golf game.
I love it. Well, sounds like you've had quite the experiences, so I'm super excited to get some insight from you today. You know, one of the questions that I really love to ask is, you know, what do you wish that you had known when you were starting out your sales career?
Yeah. You know, you can't, it's really hard to gain all the knowledge you need at the beginning, even the midpoint of a career and go to market, especially fast-paced as high tech. But I can tell you, one of the things I really wish I knew is a lot more about what entrepreneurship is and some of the statistics around it and how to actually pick what I call a winner. I think a lot of people call companies winners. And so I'm at a point where I've developed 7 principles, but I'll tell you one of the things that breaks my heart in general is for folks in our industry is that we have a lot of talented teams, you know, go-to-market teams, so sales folks, even marketing folks, and only 29% statistically of them will ever achieve quota, or at least annually achieve quota. So you've got, you know, it's really low, and I don't think people talk about it enough. A lot of times it's not the teams, and then sometimes it definitely is, and then you can see those people move around a lot. But in addition to that, you've got leaders, the leadership teams for these companies. And, you know, only 6 to 8% of them will lead a company to an exit. And I didn't necessarily even say a successful exit. I'm just talking about an exit. So, yeah, it's a little bit disheartening. And for me, you know, I think we all know people that have done well and then people that have never hit it. And I will tell you, I've seen some people that have hit it that I think are okay. And some people that I think are really good that have never hit it. And we just can't look at it and say, okay, it's luck and walk away, right? There's more to it. So I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that is. And yeah, so that's what I would focus on. And coincidentally, that's what we are focusing on.
That is what we're focusing on today. Viewers, we're doing a little bit of a different format today. Chris and I are going to be going over his 7 principles of what it takes to, or what a winning company looks like. And so obviously, you know, I'm going to hand it off to Chris. I'd love to hear about what that first principle is.
So even before I get into that, I'll share something that's interesting. You won't be surprised that I do interviews a lot. And when I do interviews, I always ask people, because by the time I'm the CRO, so by the time it's to me, usually we're at the tail end, right? So they've talked with a number of people, maybe 6 or 7 people at the company. And I always ask them, where are you at? Why have you selected the company? And what's always astounding to me, and these are people that are good, is that they might have it down to my company and another company. And I'm like, okay, well, how many companies did you actually dig into and really look at? And walk me through your buying process on, you know, saying that you want to be with our outfit. And again, it's like 1 or 2. And here's the interesting piece. I will go, walk me through the biggest thing, and I specifically say thing because it's not my business to know what it is, you've purchased in the last 3-4 years. And it'll be a house, it'll be a car, it'll be, you know, something the substantial could these days be paying college bills, but you know, it's something big. And I'll say, well, walk me through, how did you arrive at that house or that car or whatever it was? And they'll have this elaborate process involved with spreadsheets and other things. And I just find it really strange that people don't put that kind of effort into figuring out where they're going to hang their hat and spend 10 to
Yes.
12 hours a day for the next 3 years. It's incredible. I'm different in that regard. I wasn't always, and I started out my career with a really good company, and quite frankly, I was lucky.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known how to pick a good company from a bad company. I just got blessed and lucky, all wrapped into one fortune cookie, and I picked a great company. Well, wonderful. But that doesn't happen all the time. Statistically, it doesn't happen most of the time. So I've always been a vociferous reader, and there are two books that help me arrive at what I term as the 7 principles of selecting winners.
Mm.
This is my own stuff, but it's really ripped off from a myriad of reading over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
But the 2 books that I want to call out are The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which likely most people will know, by Ben Horowitz. And the other one is Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Aulet. And what he goes through, I love this book because it's not pie in the sky. He goes through 24
Yeah.
ways to not fail. But before he gets into that, he goes through all the reasons these companies do fail. And so born out of that, I came up with the 7 principles.
Amazing. Well, and I love the little anecdote about, choosing the right company is so important, because one of my favorite quotes is, you have to grow where you're planted. But on some level with career, you get to pick where you're planted, and you need to pick somewhere that's going to help you grow to the best of your ability. If you pick poor soil, then you're not going to grow as fast as somebody else.
So true. And here's what's interesting too. Anna, they will put like this much effort into selecting the company, and they'll actually
Yep.
pick a company because they like somebody, which is unbelievable. You should like them, but that's
Right.
not the reason you pick a company. And then when they get to the company, they'll like triple the effort they put into finding the company. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. Imagine if they did the opposite. They put all of their work into investigating the market and the company, and then they got there and they worked half as hard. Now, they shouldn't do that, but they'd be more successful if they did it that way.
It's true. That's true. All right. So I'm curious, what's that first principle?
I kept you waiting. So the first one, and this you'll know that the people that know the first book I mentioned will know this is directly from that particular book, which is the market. The hard thing about hard things really boils it down into 3 things: the market, the people, and the product. The first one is the market. And so what do you mean the market? Well, yeah, there's a TAM, there's a SAM, there's a SOM, but there's probably a SOM too. But is it serviceable? Is it obtainable? And a lot of people don't look at that. And by the way, it's hilarious. They call it fun with spreadsheets. You ask a lot of these founders what the TAM is. I have never heard a small TAM. I've never heard, wow, it's 200 million. It's always 8 billion, 18 billion, something crazy. And if you ask like 2 questions, 2 levels below that, you're not going to really, likely you're not going to get an appreciation for what the TAM really is. But that's the first thing, because if you have a small, total, serviceable, obtainable market, you can have a small outcome, and most people don't want that. The second thing is like when you say, well, what does market mean? What is the timing? Timing is really key. And by the way, really hard to determine the timing. A lot of these companies, they're early to market. And I worked for a CEO that once said, we don't want to be a product in search of a market. You don't want to be a solution in search of a market, right? You want to be addressing a market, which means there's got to be that pain, and there's got to be a timing around it. And, we're in the cybersecurity game, and a lot of times regulation identifies that pain, and probably 2 to 3 years after that pain is, pervasive throughout the market, they start to put regulation around it. So it's a thing you can look for. The other thing is, there are many things on this. I'm kind of condensing it, but it's competition. I have been on a number of interviews where I'm looking to qualify an opportunity, meaning a company, and they'll say, well, we don't really have competition. And I tell people, if you don't have competition, run. Absolutely run. Because if they don't have, when there's really a market that is emerging and it's worth being at and competing, you will have competition. And so it also strikes me, conversely, odd that people say, well, this is a very competitive market. Like, yeah, that's because it's really big. The timing's there, the TAM is there, and people know this. Those are the things I would say. The last thing I would say on this is the position. You know, if you look at markets, you want to be at a market making opportunity. Everyone wants that. Give me an example. I will. Palo Alto. Palo Alto 15 years ago had a market making opportunity with firewalls. CrowdStrike 9 years ago had a market making opportunity with endpoint. And now we, Aqua Security, have a market making opportunity with cloud native applications. And so you'll look for this type of stuff, and there's more things that you'll be able to identify. It's real, but that's a really big piece to it. And the only other thing I would say is this is a trick that I use that maybe your users will find interesting. Everyone knows Crunchbase, right? You got a Crunchbase. You look at a company.
Oh, definitely.
You can get the financials, right? But a lot of people don't go to the technology tab, at least on the go-to-market. Salespeople, they don't always go to the technology tab. It's a really interesting tab to go to. Why? Because it shows knocks on the door. Now, unless it's open source, and a lot of companies do have that, so you have to be mindful of that, it'll show how many visitors come to that website and what parts of the world are visiting that website on a daily basis, monthly basis. And you'll look at that, and if you don't have, I would say, at least 50,000 people coming to look at your website, do you really have a market? And you'd be shocked. A lot of these companies that are heavily funded have like 6,000, 5,000, 2,500 people coming to look at their website. Well, how much of that are you actually going to get in leads and then deals? So it's a little trick that I use, and it's not foolproof, but it's something that can give you another view on the market.
Absolutely. I mean, all of this is such valuable information and things that I think a lot of people aren't really thinking about when they're looking at a new opportunity. Because for me, I think, the majority of salespeople that I'm talking to, they want a product that they can get excited about. And so they're hearing all of these buzzwords, key phrases that they're using in the selling process and not really tracking it all the way back to understand, is this something that I can actually sell and will sell well in the long run?
Yep. Yeah, completely agree. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So the first piece was market, right? The second one, and when I was young, I used to think this was a little squishy, but it is nothing more than really important is the people. Now, you might say, well, you said the first three, market, now you know people, I haven't told you the third, are in order of importance. Why would people be number two? Shouldn't that be number one? Well, you might have great people, and they could be experienced. They could have a really good defined vision that is something they can execute on. But again, if you're in a market that doesn't believe at scale that they need whatever it is you've designed, you're just going to be surrounded with a lot of really good people that don't have a big exit. So I think it is rightfully placed at number two. Cultural fit, that's another squishy thing I didn't used to care about. As I'm no longer 20 years old, it does matter to me. Culture is a big piece of it because
absolutely.
Hindsight in your career is a big mirror. And when you look back, you go, I spent 2 to 3 years with maybe a group of people or certain folks that I didn't really like. And you go, why did I do that? And you really want to make sure if you're trying to build a company, whether it's a startup or scale up, you got to be serving time or in a foxhole with them. Foxhole a little bit probably better than saying serving time, but it's hard. And you want to be with people that there's a good fit. So people
absolutely. If you don't like the people that you work with, how can you trust them?
Yeah, trust is another big one. Truth and trust, another big aspect of the people piece.
100%.
Unfortunately, we all know, even our private lives, that's a harder thing to determine. But over time, it will get sorted.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm literally in the business of hiring people, so this is one that I get super passionate about. But now, I guess the third principle placed would be product.
Yes. So market, people, product, ripped off directly from Ben Howard. But the product piece is another thing. I think the go-to-market teams in particular don't always do a great job of vetting. It's like, well, how do you know if it's a quality product? How do you know if it's scaled? How do you know if there's a quick time to value or just that there's actual value? Well, one thing is you should be asking what the net and the gross retention rate is. Now, the challenge with that is most of these companies are private, and so you'd really want to ask that type of question of a CFO and a CEO and a CRO.
Right.
Those are the people where they're going to know it, number one, and number two, they're going to give you an honest answer. I've had people make up all kinds of gross and net retention rates. Believe me, that is not done when you're getting an investor, and it shouldn't be done in the interview process either. But that's one. The other thing is, how is that trending? Maybe it's not great right now. It doesn't mean that the product's not a good product. Maybe there's a challenge in deploying the product. Maybe it actually was worse and it's trending up, and there's going to be a big hockey stick that's positive. So the trending of that is also key. And then I think a lot of people know that there's supposed to be this in a competitive market, which means you've got a market, that there should be this 10x factor. Somebody say 3x factor, but it's got to be better than the other paths, because when people are making buying decisions, it's all about paths. We say competition. It's not competition for them. It's paths. I can do nothing. That's a path. I can get fined. That's a path. I can go with vendor A, B, C, D. I can try to develop it myself. These are all paths. And so you really need to make sure that the product actually has some type of X factor to it. And then you want to make sure that they put a fence around that by way of intellectual property, which, by the way, back to that technology tab, you can find that there as well. If they have any patent pending, if they have patents that have actually been approved, and which ones are those? Are those significant ones, or they're tertiary? Because these are the type of things that are going to help a company actually have an exit over time.
Right. I mean, when you think about it from an investment perspective, you're looking at a company. It's like, what's going to stop somebody else from ripping you off and doing what you're doing and doing it 10 times better, just going and getting better funding and bringing in different people. And so if you don't know that you have a product that's going to stand on its own for a significant period of time, you're never going to be able to get it to that 10x.
Amen.
Awesome. So moving on from the first three that you have ripped off, so to speak.
Pridefully ripped off.
Exactly. What would be number 4?
I try to put these the 4 through 7 in descending order of importance, but they might not be. But they're largely, I think, in the right orders. Financials of the company, the guts of the company. If there's no money flowing or not enough money flowing, you're going to have an issue. So how do you determine that? Well, people will obviously ask about the money in, right? So, what type of money did you get in, and who are the VCs, and what's the competing companies' venture situation look like? Money in. Now, the funny thing about this is, boy, does that sound easy. Of course, I always ask that. Well, again, I do interviews all the time. I almost never get what is the venture in and what is the last round. And you know something, you might say, well, that's because they know it and they just didn't ask. I'm telling you, I asked people. They didn't even take the time a lot that you might say, well, gee, how come these people are getting to you? You need to do a better job of vetting. Maybe also. But I've been doing this at many companies, and I'm telling you, a lot of times they don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes they'll give you a figure, and it's not even close to the figure you got. So you really should know, what is the money in? And by the way, this isn't for me. I'm not teaching people how to interview well. I'm trying to teach them how to not waste 30 years of their life by missing. There's a crazy amount of fun and money to be made in this market. You just have to be smart about it. And even then, you still need blessings and luck, right? But so the venture capital piece, they should know how much money's in. And here's a little trick. If you know how much money's in, you don't even have to, you could just go to a spreadsheet. How much money in? And how many rough and tough employees do they have? Then you can say, well, what are they doing in revenue each year, right? You now have enough to say, what is their burn rate, rough and tough? How? Very simple. You know that's about $220,000 fully burdened rate for each head at any of these scale-up startup companies. That times the amount of people, plus the revenue that they're getting in each year, minus what they took over the months past that they took it. That's roughly what the run rate is.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. Why is burn rate a big deal? I'll speak not just to the go-to-market teams, but the go-to-market leaders in this. If you start as a CRO, VP of the Americas, GM, or any of these top positions, and they're going to need to take a round in your first 6 months, that could be really bad for you. Now, I'll tell you why. Number one, there's going to be a lot of expectations when you take that round. You're essentially selling the future of the company. And I'm not talking about dilution. I'm just talking about what they're going to do in ARR. And you're going to have a lot of pressure to make sure that your business plan aligns with that. But you might not get to spend. And if you've only been there a short period of time, you really haven't had the impact to be able to know what that number could, should, and will be, or your plans aren't fully baked and executed. That could be really tough. So again, the money in and the burn rate, two really key things. And then the third thing, and I'll only mention one other, although there are many more, this is an abridged list, is who loves them? What do you mean who loves them? Sometimes it's more important who invested than what was invested.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. Insight Partners here has invested in our company, and they are a very good VC. There's many reasons for that, but they don't just invest and let things go where they may. They're very active. They have a lot of different things they've invested in to help the go-to-market from a marketing perspective, customer success perspective. And they can really throw their arms around the companies that are starting up and scaling up. So it really does matter who invested, not just what you have.
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you have somebody who's just throwing money your way and then just saying, all right, just take my money, that can be helpful depending on who that person is and what their personality is like. But the most, I feel like, sought after relationships when it comes to VCs are those that are willing to say, hey, what do you guys need? What is going to help you guys scale? And how can I help you get there?
Right on.
All right. Let's go to number 5.
So this is one I'm really passionate about because it's the acid test for how a company is going to do over time. And it's the customer value metrics. Oh, we said customer value. It's a word salad. Well, okay, but customer value is everything. I mean, think about it.
Yes.
If you and I, Anna, you were just in New York, we start a hot dog stand on the corner. And we do a great job. You've got the hot dog stand. I got to line up people. I've got a line of 1,000 people, and we have enough hot dogs for them. And day one is great. Nobody liked the hot dogs, or 80% didn't like the hot dogs. What's happening tomorrow? Well, you just line up another 1,000. Yeah, but over time, word gets out, and if the quality isn't there and the value isn't there, they're not coming back. And I'm going to say this: a lot of these customer success organizations grew up in great break fix. So what does that matter? It matters a lot, because in the old days, in a perpetual license model, you do a 100K deal, there was only 20 to 30% of maintenance. So you do that deal. The big decision for them was in the beginning. It wasn't the next year. And they usually amortized over 3 to 5 years anyway. And the game has completely changed in the last 5 years, 7 years. ARR model. So if they gave you 100K this year, it's 100K next year, 100K the following year. Add to that the macroeconomics. You better make sure your customers are getting value, and still that's not enough. You need to make sure that you're proving that they are getting value. And that means the product's not just got to be working, not just deployed, not just scalable. It's got to be making them more secure, reducing the attack surface, reducing mean time to repair, making them better, faster, less cheaper. It's got to be doing all that. And you have to have a customer-facing organization that drives that. Absolutely. That is really key. That's one of those things that I could push up from number 5, but that's why I've listed them.
Well, and I can't remember who said it to me, but I was having a conversation around this exact idea, and somebody said to me, you're not just making a deal, you're making a relationship. And if you leave it at the deal and you're just like, you know what, I sold, enjoy the product, whatever, then you're never going to get anywhere. But if those people who you've sold to, they know your name, they know that you're going to be following up with them, they know that you're going to be relaying feedback and getting updates on things that they might need help with, or that things that need to go more smoothly with the product itself, then they're going to trust you. And even if they're maybe not as thrilled with the product in its current state, they're going to be more willing to work with you on it.
Yeah, and this actually, of course, they all interoperate with each other, but it gets back to the people component. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between a CSM, and I don't want to get too acronym in this particular space. As somebody who is technical and somebody who is a technical account manager, these are different things. And
Yes.
the technical account managers in the customer success realm are the most expensive. And you'll find a lot of these companies do not invest in it. They look at it and they say, well, why do we need all that? We can simply have, this person and that person run it. And they kind of, quite frankly, half do a good job in multiple areas. But investment in technical account managers is a key piece to making sure customers are getting that value.
Absolutely, because if you've got them talking to multiple different people, it's not as personable. But whereas if you have somebody that can talk to them about the technical and also run that kind of customer success function, then you've got a rock solid relationship.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to number 6.
I knew you were going to ask me this. So number 6, this is, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this because I think it's, to your audience, largely going to be obvious, but you need a strong go-to-market leader, sales, channels, customer success, marketing, and then they need to have a strategy. And there's another podcast I talked about playbooks. Do you know that nobody in my interview process that has come into my organization, and I've run channels, marketing, customer success, sales, post-sales, services, run it all. Nobody's ever once come to me and said, hey, can I see your playbook? Or maybe you don't want to share it because I'm not an employee yet. Can you just kind of walk me through topically what's in the table of contents? It's never happened once.
Really?
Now, wouldn't that be
that's shocking?
Isn't it? Wouldn't it be an acid test for an employee to say, a prospective employee that's interviewing to say, hey, you look like a quality go-to-market person. Why don't you show me your playbook? Or why don't you give me the table of contents? That would be great. Never happened. Never happened. And, clearly in playbook, you need a million things. Most people, by the way, interchange playbook with medic. Medic should be a chapter in your playbook, but it should not be your playbook. Channels. Channels is another one. I think a lot of people that are CEOs of companies don't fully understand channels and don't really understand the system integrators and what the cloud alliances can do for you, the MSPs can do for you, even the value-added resellers, which are more localized. Some are, of course, national. But there needs to be a real strategy around that, and that depends on the company, the vertical, and the timing. And there often isn't, which is why a lot of people think that when they come back, one of the areas they come back is channels. It's because they don't fully understand it. And again, that's on the shoulders of the go-to-market leader to make sure that there is established value back to the business.
Well, and I'm curious, and this is one of the questions that I would typically ask on this podcast is, what is maybe for you one of the most important qualities that somebody in a leadership position like that would need to have in order to be successful?
I would say, and you asked for only one, so I'm not going to give you 3. You asked for one. I'm going to honor that and give you one, even though it's very difficult. And I would say creativity. And now let me defend it just for a bit, because some probably say structures, some say organizations. I hope they don't just say charisma, although it's a component. Why creativity? Playbooks are great, but they need to breathe. Not one company at one time and one customer is exactly the same.
Yep.
And what I found is a lot of my peers that are CROs, first of all, they're mostly really smart, really hardworking, really dedicated, and usually hyper-structured. And that is really good. What I find that they often do not bring to the table is creativity. And that's a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're never going to be able to just fit somebody into the same square peg over and over and over and over again. If you did, then sales would be easy.
Yep. It's one of the reasons I hear people say, well, I've got a playbook. And I still hear this. I think this largely came from a company I really respect, by the way, Parametric Technology, PTC is the acronym. And they say, well, I've got a playbook and I can hire anybody. But it's like, it's like that does not work anywhere, and it has never worked. You can't just hire anybody and put them in your playbook and it works. Again, back to the creativity thing. So that's my final answer, creativity.
All right. Last principle, Chris. Are you ready?
I am ready. Lucky number 7. They should have, and usually don't, an exit strategy. Now, what you'll typically hear is, we're going to IPO. Well, I mean, of course you are, right? Like,
right.
Of course you're going to IPO. What else are you going to say? We're going to fail wildly. We're going to do it slowly over 2 decades. Like, nobody ever says that.
Never once.
Okay, good on you. So, and a hat tip to my Aussie friends. So, they should have a strategy. Are we an M&A play? And some will just flat out tell you, and I respect that. If you're an M&A play, fine. But there's a big difference in how you fund, how you structure if you're going to IPO, or if you're going to M&A, or private equity is another way to go too. By the way, I mean, private equity, it's a lot of people don't like it, but I'm going to tell you, the very successful companies that are private equity companies, I think with the macroeconomics, you're going to see a lot more of them. That's an exit. That's a win.
Absolutely.
And I won't mention the name of the company, but there's a very successful company out there where the CEO doesn't want to M&A, doesn't want to, private equity, doesn't want to IPO, and they're very successful. Anybody who's at this company that listens will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to mention the name because, what I'm saying isn't necessarily flattering. But the CEO doesn't want any of those. He just wants a company that he's going to run, like maybe forever. Well, that's horrible. Why do we go to these companies? We go to these companies because we're trying to build equity for our children, for our grandchildren. You don't get that type of wealth build from a W-2. You get that from an equity. And building companies is really hard. So you're doing it for that equity. And so now you've got somebody that's just like, no matter how successful they are, they're not going to IPO, not going to M&A, not going to private equity. It's like, I don't know. I feel like that's a shame.
Yeah.
Exit strategy should be fully vetted.
Absolutely. Well, this has been just the most amazing experience to hear from somebody who's gone through so many different exits and just sales experience over the last 30 years of just what it takes or what it looks like to see a really winning company. So I really want to just thank you again for your time today, Chris.
Anna, thank you for having me. Appreciate what you do.
Of course. Absolutely. And, one of the things that I always like to do at the end is ask if you have anything else you'd like to share with our viewers. Could be personal advice, professional advice, your favorite quote. What do you got?
Let's see. Something I'd like to share with the audience. I would say there's many things I could share, but I'm just going to share this. Is be a student of the game. The people that are students of the game, say you didn't learn anything from anything I said, I hope you did, but if you didn't and you knew it all, that's great. Be a student of the game. Like I would be really, it would seem like I was bragging if I talked about how much I read in this industry and outside this industry. Just be a student of the game. And that's another interview question I ask, and I don't usually get a good answer. What's the last book you read? I don't really get a good answer. And that means you're not a student of the game. I mean, yes, podcasts, some people don't read. Like they learn on YouTube, and I do that too. But invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. Be a student of the game. That's what I would do.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, again, for being on here today. And everybody, again, this is Next in Sales, a Next Level podcast. If you liked what Chris or I had to say today, I would highly encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share this with anyone who you think could benefit from it, because I know that just about anybody could. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.